We're recording.
All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Bro History. It's Henry Zamota and Danny Abdel-Jabbar. What's going on, my friend?
Chilling as per usual. A little bit upset that we had some technical difficulties on the first go of this one.
Yeah, we did. We were recording about 15 minutes in, and the whole thing just dropped. So now we're restarting the podcast and taking it right from the beginning. But the first thing I do want to comment on before we get going, because we did have some good banter that I don't want to
lose that.
Yeah, I don't want to lose that banter. So Danny has finally shaved his beard.
Yep. Beard is gone.
And he was going on an airplane, right? That's what you told me? Yeah. That's the joke that I said. No, it looks good. But in addition to Danny shaving his beard, he also has a new background with a bunch of books.
No books. You're not seeing it now because we had technical difficulties live streaming. But if you go on YouTube, you might end up seeing parts of that live stream. It's just a blank white wall. You know, we're in a new location now. That's part of the reason why we took a little bit of a hiatus from recording. Let us know what you think I should put on this wall. I swear if it's books, I'm just going to ignore it. But it'd be cool to see what you guys think I should do. I'm definitely thinking about painting it in that like bro history blue. Maybe a decal. I don't know, some sound foam for sure. That's functional. I don't know. What do you think, Henry? What should I put up?
I think you should get a big pile of books.
But
that's the only way to do it. So we were joking before that, this has obviously been a long-running joke since COVID-19 hit, that every single newscaster has been in a big dick swinging contest to who has the biggest bookshelf.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a parody of itself right now, because most of them probably have never read the books that are in their background, or they're like cherry picking their favorite books of all time. Like, this book is really special to me, so I'm going to show them that I read this.
Right.
And all the journalists are like the people on CNN. They're all putting like these muckracker books, like Journalism Saves Democracy, like those type of books, like so snooty. And I was telling Danny prior that I would love to play a joke on somebody, on one of them, and if I could turn invisible, I would sneak into there right before they're about to broadcast them to, I was going to say millions, but CNN does not get millions of people watching them at once.
Yeah, they get billions.
Tens of thousands.
Tens
of thousands of people watching. And I would slip in like Mein Kampf into his bookshelf. And just see what the reaction would be.
Well, I mean, it would be immediate, I think, because the type of people that watch CNN are also like the type of people that would pick up on shit like that.
Yeah. Does that Mein Kampf? There is you ever go to I forget the beach. Was it Long Island City Beach? Not Long Island City Beach.
Long Beach Island.
Long Beach Island. I went to a beach there that has like give a book, take a book.
Mm-hmm.
Thing. You ever see that? It's
I've seen that all over Bushwick, actually.
You take a book in there and you give a book in there. So
right.
You're kind of passing it along.
Right.
So I always thought it would be really funny to put something like ridiculous inside one of those things.
Like what? What would you put other than Mein Kampf? Because that'd be hilarious.
That would just be unbelievable. But then again, if you got caught doing that as an obvious joke,
mm-hmm.
You would do that as a joke,
right?
Like to shock someone beyond belief.
Mm-hmm.
You would, if someone caught you doing that, your life would be ruined. They'd be like, this guy is spreading Hitler propaganda. So I wouldn't actually do that, but it would be hilarious. Like, just think about that in the context. Like, who the fuck left Mein Kampf in this? Like,
what off-right fucking
what meth head like guy who just got out of jail, neo-Nazi, just put this in here? That would be the reaction.
Yeah.
But enough about that.
Enough about Mein Kampf.
Enough about that. We need to talk about some stuff that's happened over the past 2 weeks. Specifically, what is going on with this story about a bounty on U.S. soldiers.
We're not talking about the paper towel rolls.
So 2 weeks ago, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, all three of them, they published stories which claim that there was a Russian bounty program on American soldiers in Afghanistan.
Right.
They were allegedly paying the Taliban for killing U.S. soldiers. And to make matters worse, Trump was informed about this, and he did nothing. Because allegedly. So that was the story that initially came out. What was your reaction?
Yeah, man. I mean, surprisingly, this being one of those typical orange man bad, Russiagate collusion type of stories, you would think that I would have bought this immediately and just hook, line, sinker. But the premise of it and the sourcing of this was just so convoluted that pretty much right off the bat, I was like, I don't know about this. Like, I texted you about it. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, is this real? I texted Danny Sherson, whose article I read afterwards, and it was pretty awesome. And I'd like to quote that in a bit, but just get his opinion. I was pretty much asking everyone who knows anything about foreign policy, like, is this real, or am I being punked? Like, what is this? I still kind of feel that way, but I think there might be something. I don't think it's nearly as blown up as the mainstream media would have you take it. But I think there's something there.
What was Danny Sherson's take? I read his article, but what did he say to you?
I mean, pretty much what he told me via text message was exactly what he wrote in the article. It's just like, how could we trust these unnamed sources when we have done the exact same shit? Like the exact shit that we're apparently levying against the Russians. Like, we've literally done it to them, So, like, the fact that it's all, like, obsequious and, like, obfuscated and shit like that, like, it's kind of bullshit, and that we should be skeptical about the sourcing of it. And I kind of agree with that. I think we totally should be skeptical. And something I told him was that, I'm definitely skeptical about it, and I would like for there to be an investigation about it, just for the fact of, like, I want to see where the fuck did this idea come from? Like, is this total bullshit? And if it is, that's sad, or if there's something to it, but it's not nearly as blown up as what the media would have you think, then that's also a fair conclusion, And if it's really bad, meaning it's 100% true, then, well, fuck, like, that's worth an investigation in and of itself. So I'm curious. I want to see the evidence. I'm on Tammy Duckworth's side. I want to know what do you got? Show me what you got.
Well, what's really interesting is that you sent me this poll from Reuters. The majority of Americans think that this is true. About 60% think it's true, and I really suspect that this is a very partisan. This is on partisan lines. That the majority of Democratic voters think it's true, and the 10% of Republicans who love killing brown people think it's true as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a decent amount of Republicans that are concerned about this too. Even like ones in Congress and stuff like that were briefed on it.
Well, that's the Republicans and Democrats in Congress are basically the same creature when it comes to these things. So it's not like they don't reflect a lot of the they don't reflect the same divisions that, like, a normal conservative and a normal liberal will typically have. They just do a lot of lip service to those ideals.
Right.
However,
they want votes.
yeah, they're just catering to people. But when it comes to pretty much everything, I mean, they vote the same most of the time. The vast majority of the time, Democrats and Republicans vote very closely to each other. But to peel this back, because I want to go through this entire story and just like tell you what my what I think ultimately happened, and we'll just do this by starting from the very beginning.
Sure.
So on the 26th, a report from the New York Times, aka the paper of record, said that American intelligence officials have concluded that a Russian military intelligence unit secretly offered bounties to Taliban-linked militants for killing coalition forces in Afghanistan, including targeting American troops amid the peace talks to end the long-running war there, according to officials briefed on the matter.
Quote unquote, according to officials briefed on the matter.
According to officials briefed on the matter. And hold on, I'll put a pin in that because I'm going to bring something up on that later. So the United States concluded months ago that the Russians had covertly offered rewards for successful attacks last year. And this is just odd because it's written in such certainty. It's suggesting that like, the intelligence, U.S. intelligence has reached a firm conclusion that this is a true thing. This was happening. That the Russians were putting out bounties on killing American soldiers and in Afghanistan, which just doesn't really add up. And the first reason why it doesn't add up to me is that why does the Taliban need an economic incentive to fight?
To kill coalition forces,
to kill.
Right.
So I'm just like, all right, why would they need an economic incentive to do that? Like,
no, I'm with you 100% on that. Like, they're just fine without it. But I will say, playing devil's advocate, that they're not going to turn down an economic incentive either. So it's not that they need it, but they certainly wouldn't turn it down. So this is why I'm like, maybe, but show me what you got, like show me the evidence. And I think the point that I got stuck on for that exact line that you just read was the United States concluded months ago, right? That's that one line that you quoted for them. So they're being, how can I best describe this? They're being shady about how they make it so conclusive, right? The United States, as if it's one singular entity, concluded this. No, a very specific organization concluded it, and this was the CIA during an intelligence meeting. And the national security apparatus, the National Security Agency, I should say, was skeptical about it. So in no circumstances could we say with like firm belief that the quote United States, like as a singular entity, concluded that this was a thing. Elements like specific agencies within the United States have suggested it, and some of them are very concerned about it, and some of them are like meh about it. So I agree with you on the way that this was worded. This is probably the reason why that Reuters poll shows that so many people believed it, because it was written so definitively. The way that it's been reported on is just so definitive that it happened. It 100% is true. It's a thing. It's the word of God.
Well, here's what happened. So this is like the trick that newspapers do, that the mainstream media does. They will start quoting and confirming each other's papers, like, oh yeah, we got the same story. So what happened was that the Washington Post picked up the story as well, because I guess the same anonymous officials called the Washington Post as well as the Wall Street Journal. And the Washington Post, the next day, they released an article saying Russian operation targeted coalition troops in Afghanistan, intelligence finds. And it says, I'll quote a little bit from it, a Russian military spy unit offered bounties to Taliban-linked militants to attack coalition forces in Afghanistan, including U.S. and British troops, in a striking escalation of the Kremlin's hostility towards the United States, American intelligence has found. The Russian operation, first reported by the New York Times, has generated an intense debate within the Trump administration about how best to respond to a troubling new tactic by a nation that most U.S. officials regard as a potential foe, but that President Trump has frequently embraced as a friend, said the officials, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss a sensitive intelligence matter. See, we can't tell us who we are because, we're making it up. Like, that's what it always sounds to me. Whenever there is a anonymous intelligence official, it's just like, I understand that if you're an anonymous intelligence official and if you're leaking information, or if you're giving out information, why don't you at least just provide some evidence then? Like, You know, there's got to
be,
give some evidence to these claims. Otherwise, then you could literally just fucking, say Donald Trump allegedly has 3 penises. It's like,
right, and they're all really small.
They're all really all 3 of them don't hit 4 inches.
Yeah.
It's combined. Like combined. I mean, you can make up whatever. And it just sounds shady as fuck.
I hear you. And listen, the way that this is written makes it feel that way. Like I totally understand where you're coming from like bullshit would like prove that this is real, right? Now there's some stuff that I dug up kind of on the side, specifically one from Washington Post that was a timeline of events that they used to corroborate their evidence, and I found reported pretty much on every mainstream media outlet a specific named official that went on the record talking about how they had evidence of this, but I don't think necessarily that it lends itself very well to how they, are conclusively saying that this was a thing. So I'm coming back to the idea that I think there's something here. I don't think it's as big a deal as they're trying to make it out to be. And they're definitely writing it in a way of like hardcore Orange Man bad, Russiagate collusion, like all that stuff. Like they're taking it and they're running with it hard, which leads people like you who are understandably skeptical to just be like, this is bullshit. Like this is completely lie, just by the nature of the way that they write it and the way that they hide behind the unnamed sources and the way that they lack specificity in when they're writing about it.
It's just like I hate this type of reporting because this is the exact same reporting that lied us into the Iraq War.
Right.
Like essentially how
100%.
the tactic for the Iraq War was that there was a circle jerk going on between mainly the New York Times and New York Times writers like William Safire and Judith Miller, who were being leaked information from the Office of Special Plans that were cherry picking intelligence information, and making fabrications about Saddam Hussein having just insane allegations about Saddam Hussein's having chemical weapons labs underneath his palace, and fucking just
WMDs
all this great
and
connections
the whole,
connections in Prague with between Iraqi security forces and Al Qaeda, just like transferring anthrax, like literally making things up, and then they would push it to the New York Times. The New York Times would publish it. Like morons like Judith Miller, who went to jail, would publish it, who deserved to go to jail, then got a job in Fox News afterwards. I met somebody who I was talking to somebody. This was probably about 2 years ago or so, 2 or 3 years ago. It was at the Manhattan Institute. I guess I'm already saying too much. And Judith Miller was speaking there, and I was talking to someone out there, and I was like, what the fuck? I was like, why the fuck is this disgraced hack like here? And someone was like, well, Judith Miller, she didn't know that, she literally she just believed that she had the right data. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? She went to jail. Like, this woman is a fucking lie. And it was ridiculous. But I feel like that's the same tactic that is being used. Because what happened is that when guys like Paul Wolfowitz would testify in front of Congress about the invasion of Iraq, or like, why do we need to invade Iraq? He would go ahead and he would quote New York Times stories. Like, well, the New York Times reported this. But then meanwhile, that specific office within the Pentagon was the source that was leaking this information to your New York Times. So they were quoting
they were quoting themselves,
and it all ended up being stories that these neoconservatives were writing, for PNAC, for the project, for their neoconservative think tank publication. They were stories that were written to justify an actual invasion of Iraq, which all of a sudden just came to life and then ended up in the New York Times.
Right.
It's just like the most ridiculous thing ever, and that's
Right.
why I hate this level of journalism.
I mean, I can't even argue with you. You know, like I think you're totally right. You're right to feel this way about not just specifically this story, but and pretty much any story that starts off by saying, you know, unnamed intelligence agencies say, and then insert whatever bullshit you want, right? Obviously, that's really troubling because it's like there is a part of me that just wants a trustworthy like intelligence agency that we can get good information from and like be informed about. And it sucks that every time we hear any piece of news that starts with that, the first thing we're going to think about is like, oh, this is bullshit, just like they did to us, you know, during the start of the first Afghanistan war. You know, like it's just bullshit, you know? Sucks.
And it does suck. And the New York Times, they followed up with a story on the 28th titled "Spies and Commandos Warned Months Ago of Russian Bounties on U.S. Troops." So the recovery, it's June 28th, the recovery of large amounts of American cash at a Taliban outpost in Afghanistan helped tip off U.S. officials. It is believed that at least one U.S. troop death was a result of the bounties. The crucial information that led spies and commandos to focus on bounties included recovery of large amount of American cash from a raid on a Taliban outpost that prompted suspicions. Interrogations of captured militants and criminals played a central role in making the intelligence community confident in its assessment that the Russians had offered and paid bounties in 2019, another official has said. So this is where things get really weird. This is where things get shaky.
Right.
And, you know, the lies are always in the
so
omission.
We enhanced interrogated some people.
Well, it's not even that. It's not we. It's they enhanced interrogated people. The U.S. We never had. We didn't do anything. The Afghan forces are the ones that arrested these guys.
Right.
So the New York Times report. Well, first of all, the cash. Why would large amounts of cash be a red flag? Do you know?
I saw that too. I'm like, why? What does it matter that they found $500K during a SEAL sting operation? It's like, so?
Like, they reported that a large amount of cash found at a Taliban outpost had led intelligence to suspect the bounty system.
Right.
So here's something, and this is from the writing of Gareth Porter, who wrote about this in the Gray Zone. And Gareth Porter is one of the best investigative journalists alive. So the raid that turned up this $500,000 in cash was on Rahmatullah Azizi, an Afghan businessman involved in both drug trafficking and contracting for construction projects.
So they found $500,000 on a drug lord. And they're like, aha, Russian bounty money.
There is fucking drug money everywhere in that country.
Yeah, totally. Everywhere.
There is money. There is cash everywhere in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. What the hell do you think that we've been doing there for the past 20 years?
Right.
The U.S. has been paying the Taliban billions of dollars since 2006 or 2005. In protection money for convoys of U.S. supplies in the country. Mm-hmm. And this captured militants is very, very vague. Because those captured militants that were interrogated, they were relatives and business associates of Rahmatullah Azizi, whose house was raided. So did I miss something? Like, why was that not reported on it? The people who that were arrested and interrogated were the business associates of this drug lord that they did a raid on.
Right.
Found this money on. Like, you can't. Like, isn't that something important to
don't they have a vested interest in like deferring the blame onto something else? Yeah.
Well, don't you write about that? Like, don't you include that in the actual article that these were business associates? This wasn't like a Taliban this wasn't like some random Taliban outpost and he just took some militants. That's how the story is being painted. This was, a guy that the Afghan security forces deemed a criminal, and they went and they seized his cash and they arrested his business and family, his business partners and family members. So they ended up taking him, and I mean, the NDS, the Afghan intelligence service, they're bastards. They torture the fuck out of people.
Right.
So you don't know how this information was
acquired.
Mm-hmm. You know, like, how did the NDS torture these guys? Probably. Did they threaten to torture them? They definitely threatened to torture them at the very least. Were they trying to get specific answers for them? Why was the intelligence reporting from the CIA station on the bounty claims, why was it so close to when Trump was going to sign a peace deal with the Taliban? I guess they weren't able to prevent them from signing it, but it was around that same time. And it's just all these kind of very, very
see, I'm with you up until that idea that it's somehow linked to the timeline of like trying to get something done on Afghanistan. I don't see that thread as clearly as you do. And you know, there's things outside of, like, I think the getting information from the captured Taliban people, like, that's super, super questionable. And I almost throw that evidence out the window. But there's like other shit that happened that apparently these sources like New York Times and Washington Post are using as a corroborating evidence. And I got a really short timeline for you that I think will help add to the one that you did. And this one goes back before even, you know, we started hearing about it. So it breaks down like this. So in April 2017, the Army General John Nicholson, who was the top U.S. commander in Afghanistan at the time, he confirmed basically that Russia was arming the Taliban, right? So that's like the first important point that, you know, Washington Post wants you to know, that evidently, you know, the Russians are definitely arming the Taliban, right? And in February 2018, 100 Russian mercenaries are killed by the U.S. and their moderate rebels in Syria. And apparently because of this, the Russians were pissed off about it. And this is allegedly the reason why they would put, you know, a bounty on coalition forces in Afghanistan to like get back at them. This part I'm thinking is super weak, but hey, they're the ones reporting it. They're trying to set up the story that way, right? They're saying, you know, we killed a bunch of mercs in Syria and they were pissed off because those mercs were evidently really close to some oligarchs that are buddies with Putin. I don't know. That's the deal. And then April 2019, so, you know, a year later, 3 U.S. Marines die in an attack on their convoy in Afghanistan, and the Taliban claims responsibility for this. And apparently, quote unquote, intelligence officials call this proof of the bounties, as reported by the New York Times and the Washington Post. So, you know, we see they killed 100 mercs in Syria, and then a year later, 3 Marines die in Afghanistan, and aha! See, they did it, right? And then early 2019, Washington Post says the White House was briefed about it. There is some corroborating evidence that it did end up in one of those reports that he doesn't read, and that comes up again later on. Early 2020,
came up on one of those reports on the back page.
Yeah.
No,
well, I mean, the point is that he doesn't read them anyway. So
yeah.
And that I think is actually probably true. But anyway, early 2020. Now we're talking about that SEAL operation, right? So SEAL Team 6 raids a Taliban outpost. They're calling it a Taliban outpost here, but as you so duly pointed out, you know, this is like some random drug lord businessman in Afghanistan. Anyway, so we find $500K in cash there, and apparently this is proof the Russians were giving them money. But to your point, there's drug money literally fucking everywhere, all over Afghanistan. So I found this to be kind of weak proof that the Russians were giving them money, as if, you know, you can't find any money in Afghanistan. And then there was a quote there that said, "This affirmed the intelligence community's suspicions that Russia was paying bounties." And I just thought, like, again, to your point about them being so definitive about the fact that this is all but confirmed, right? And then March 2020, there is apparently a big intelligence meeting here in the United States about this. And so this is going back to what I was telling you about how definitively they're trying to say that the United States is concluded that the Russians are paying bounties on Americans in Afghanistan. But in fact, during this meeting in March 2020, the CIA was pushing this narrative. They were saying it's definitely Russia. It's definitely Russia. They're definitely paying bounties. On the other hand, though, the National Security Agency is being much more skeptical about it and thinking like, maybe let's take a look at it. Let's look into it. And then here comes another one of those weird quotes. The New York Times reported that sources, quote unquote, have confirmed the information which was contained in Trump's written Presidential Daily Brief, or PDB, which Trump reportedly rarely, if ever, reads. So evidently there was a big thing in March 2020, right? The big meeting with all of the national security folks. It wasn't conclusive about whether or not they actually think that this was a thing, right? It was pretty split. CIA said it was happening. National Security Agency said it maybe was. I don't know. And all of it did end up on Trump's desk. This part is actually pretty well corroborated. And I actually do think that he didn't read it. Like point blank. I bet it landed on his desk and he just didn't pay attention to it. But I also don't know if it was as big a deal as the mainstream media is talking about, because they're not really showing a whole lot of like direct evidence that, one, people were killed, and two, it was directly because of a bounty that Russians put on them. And the last thing I'll say on this is that afterwards, in late June, Congress was briefed on it, but separately across party lines, and Republicans were concerned about it, quote unquote, and the Democrats were just saying that they were hearing the White House spin version of it. So again, like, there are events that they're trying to say point to something happened. And I honestly think there is a shred of like something going on there. I just don't know if it's as big a deal as they're making it out to be. And it's certainly not as conclusive as they say, because very recently, I don't know if you read this one. Did you hear about General Frank McKenzie? He's like commander of U.S. Central Command. He came out not too long ago saying some stuff.
What did he say?
Well, actually, he's probably the only person that came out on record about this particular topic. And he was saying that, I'll just quote him. So he says, the intelligence wasn't proved to me. It was proved enough to worry me, but it wasn't proved enough that I'd take it to a court of law. That's often true in battlefield intelligence. So what he's saying is, like, I got some evidence about this,
but it's a rumor that might be true.
Right.
That's what he's saying. It's a rumor that might be true.
He got some evidence of it, right? And it worried him, right? It was enough to worry him, but it wasn't enough for him to take to court, right? And so he goes on to say later, I just didn't find that there was a causative link there. It worried me, and we take extreme force protection measures all the time in Afghanistan. You see a lot of indicators. Many of them are troubling. Many of them you act on. But in this case, there just wasn't one there. I sent the intelligence guys back to continue to dig on it, and I believe they're continuing to dig on it right now. So it's not that it's total bullshit, right? Something is there, but we just do not have enough evidence on it. And the evidence that we do have isn't worrying enough to do anything about. So this whole idea that the mainstream is doing right now, I'm not apologizing for Trump at all. I'm sure he saw something about it and ignored it. But the point, though, is that it was a nothing burger at the time that he saw it. And it's still kind of a nothing burger until they figure out more evidence for it. It's just not enough. I think there's something there. It's not total lies, but it just doesn't rise to the, issue that they're making it out to be. And this is coming from the only source, the only named intelligence official that has spoken out about it.
And what I saw is that the CIA and the NCTC, they gave the intelligence assessment a moderate confidence score,
right? Exactly.
Which means that it's information that is up for interpretation. Like, hey, it might be true.
Right.
The NSA gave it a low confidence score.
Mm-hmm.
So there's conflicting visions. And the New York Times, they released another article on July 3rd. And titled, "The New Administration Memo Seeks to Foster Doubts About Suspected Russian." So I'll just quote from it. A memo produced in recent days by the Office of the nation's top intelligence officials acknowledged that the CIA and top counterterrorism officials have assessed that Russia appears to have offered bounties to kill American coalition troops in Afghanistan, but emphasized uncertainties and gaps in evidence, according to these three officials. What is that from? It's from Game of Thrones, where he said, it's like, my father told me that anything you say before but isn't true. Isn't that what it is?
I think so, yeah.
As Jon Snow says that to Tyrion.
Mm-hmm.
Something along the lines. It's either that or Braveheart, but I'm pretty sure it's Game of Thrones. The memo said that the CIA and the National Counterterrorism Center, the NCTC, had assessed that with medium confidence, meaning credible source and plausible, but falling short of near certainty, that a unit of the Russian military intelligence service known as the GRU offered the bounties, according to the two of the officials briefed on its contents. But other parts of the intelligence community, including the NSA, which favors electronic surveillance intelligence, said that they did not have information to support that conclusion at the same level, therefore expressing lower confidence in the conclusion, according to the two officials. So, again, it's a rumor. And with torturing, torturing is like, torture doesn't get you information that you need. It gets you information that you want.
Right.
Study
after study confirms that, that the evidence obtained from torture is either inconsistent or wrong.
Hell, even General Flynn even knew that.
Mm-hmm.
General Flynn, like Mike Flynn was like, hey, we gotta, it's better just to talk to these guys. The best way to interrogate somebody is just sit down and talk to them, not to fucking waterboard them,
right,
or start cutting their fingers off, or worse.
Right.
So, now let's look at like the backlash. Of course, despite this, the New York Times basically walking back the story with this article. Like that's basically what this is, like a walk back, saying, yeah, like, all this, most likely it happened, but these intelligence agencies, they're not confirming it. So this is not going to stop the politicians from trying to, at the very least, prevent Trump from leaving Afghanistan. And the House Armed Service Committee voted in favor of an amendment that passed 45-11.
Mm-hmm.
All the Democrats on the committee voted for this while working with Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney is the daughter of Dick Cheney. Good old Dick Cheney. How the hell did another Cheney get elected?
Name brand recognition.
That's nuts to me. Politics is basically a family business.
Yeah.
It would require that before Trump, so the amendment would require that before Trump reduces troop levels in Afghanistan below 8,000, and then again below to 4,000, he would have to meet all sorts of conditions. And wouldn't you guess it, the conditions are almost impossible to meet. So for the troop reductions from Afghanistan to be allowed, the Defense Department must be able to certify, among other things, that leaving Afghanistan will not increase the risk for the expansion of existing or formation of new terrorist safe havens in Afghanistan. Like, come on, there's no way that you'll be able to guarantee that or be able to certify that. I mean, that would just be a total political thing if you certified that. Of course, there's going to be there's going to be Islamists in Afghanistan that probably grow after the U.S. leaves.
Yeah, I mean, but I get why they put. I totally agree that that's like, it's an unreasonable ask, because it probably will happen and there's no way to certify it. But like, I also get why they put it in there, because the last time we left a power vacuum, ISIS was created. So they're worried about like pulling out and getting another ISIS. But again, this is just like, chicken and the egg kind of shit. If we weren't in there in the first place, we wouldn't have made, the conditions by which if we pulled out, we create an ISIS. It's kind of a negative feedback loop there.
I don't buy that Obama pulling out created ISIS. That's one of the criticisms. A lot of people do. That's one of the criticisms of Obama I do not buy, and I am very critical of Barack Obama that him pulling out created ISIS. What created ISIS was the invasion of Iraq. That created ISIS. The invasion of Iraq in the first place created Iraq. Like creating Al Qaeda in Iraq, which is ISIS.
Right.
It happened because we invaded Iraq and occupied the country and fired everyone who worked in the government, and everyone knows were the people who formed the rebellion. There was no Al Qaeda in Iraq before the U.S. invaded.
And I'm saying that the fear that an ISIS will pop up in Afghanistan is exactly the same argumentation. The reason why that might happen when we pull out of Afghanistan isn't because we pull out of Afghanistan. It's because we went into Afghanistan in the first place.
But it's just this condition is just it's just there's no way for it to be met.
Right.
To be met. Like the Taliban will most likely take over the country.
Very likely.
Very, very likely. But the thing is, though, the Taliban, they're not some transnational terror threat. When the hell has the Taliban are like a bunch of conservative right wingers? It's like
they're like a bunch. Keep going.
they're like a bunch of conservative right wingers who just want to be left alone and implement whatever their Sharia law and live in strict orthodoxy to their religion. It's the ISIS that are the left wingers who want to go spread they want to spread Islam worldwide. They want to spread the caliphate. They want to bring the revolution to you. There's like a difference. So
yeah, I guess if you put it that way, that makes sense.
Hey man, if you look at it that way, like the Taliban, they're only a force in their region, for the Pashtun population in Afghanistan.
I'm not.
They're not the ones who are like starting creating caliphates, and I mean the whole reason why Taliban was created in the first place is because after the Afghan Civil War, when after the Soviet invasion. There was a civil war after they left, and Afghanistan became it went to anarchy. Like literally, it was a complete failed state. There was no monopoly on violence whatsoever, and
there was no government.
And there was such chaos. There was such brutality going on. There was a lot of brutality towards children going on in Afghanistan. There was a lot of rape of kids going on in Afghanistan. And the Taliban came and started hanging a lot of these people off construction equipment. Like that was their calling card. They would take a rapist and hang them on a crane or something like that. And believe it or not, the Pashtuns are like, hey, maybe these guys aren't. At least they're better than these guys. Like,
right, they're better than the rapos.
There's some semblance of order with the Taliban. So
they became regional warlords.
It's like if they foster, and they only fostered Osama bin Laden for a very short amount of time. So
I mean, I wouldn't downplay that enough. I mean, it's not great that they fostered Osama bin Laden. It's just not great. I wouldn't sweep that under the rug, but I think the important part is
he was gone by the time he got there. Let's just put it that way.
Exactly. It's like the Taliban is not the same as Al Qaeda, right? The Taliban does stuff in Afghanistan. Al Qaeda tries to do stuff everywhere, outside of their region. They want to attack outside, right? And that's kind of the point that you're trying to get at.
Yeah, that's the point that I'm trying to get at in a very long-winded rant. So the other demand is that it can't compromise the counterterrorism mission against the Islamic State, Al Qaeda, and associated forces. Which
I don't even know what that means. What is? How does you compromise?
It's just grouping all. Yeah, it's like for them to compromise it, you'd have to come to the conclusion that the U.S. is actually fighting these forces. You know, like how can you compromise the effort when they're not even fighting? You mean
when was the last like mission against Al Qaeda? Like I don't remember reading about one.
The last time the U.S. did something against Al Qaeda was when they killed Baghdadi up in northern Syria. That was the last major event. Every once in a while, the U.S. will bomb like an Al Qaeda outpost up in Idlib. Like they'll just do it out of the blue. Like every couple of months, they'll kill some fat fucking terrorist fucking leader who doesn't do anything, who sits on his bed and just fucking masturbates all day. Like that, every once in a while, they'll kill one of those guys, but they're not like effectively shifting things going on in the battlefield. Like they're killing figureheads of the Islamic State.
The playing cards that they released after 9/11, right? Those guys.
They're not.
I think we're down to like the 4 of clubs or some shit like that, right?
The most effective thing to do is that to stop them took place when Trump first became president, and when he stopped the CIA funding a lot of the groups in Syria. That was the most effective countermeasure. Stop supporting them.
Mm-hmm. Now, and correct me if I'm wrong. ISIS isn't in Afghanistan, right?
I mean, anyone can pick up a rifle and say they're ISIS. You know, it's like it's an ideology more than like
a centralized group.
More than it was a centralized group, but that caliphate is dead now.
Right.
Now it's just a bunch of like people, you know, swearing allegiance to Baghdadi, or I guess now dead Baghdadi, now swearing allegiance to you know, to some warlord and just saying they're fighting in the name of them. But there's not like a caliphate growing. That has largely been destroyed. Where most Al-Qaeda, I think the big hotspot for Al-Qaeda and the Salafist militant groups now is in Yemen. Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula, because they're getting a covert support from the UAE that's very direct in the fight against the Houthis. Now that the fighting up in Syria is, I mean, still going on, but you know, it's kind of in a weird limbo place. But down in the Arabian Peninsula, that's where I'm concerned about the next major you know, I'm concerned that the next big terrorist attack in the U.S. or anywhere outside will be from somebody from that region.
But the point is that that's not Afghanistan. And
that's not Afghanistan. It's far away from Afghanistan.
Right.
That's in our allies' backyard, Saudi Arabia.
We're looking in the wrong place. We're basically putting these conditions on the wrong place.
Yeah, imagine if we put conditions like that on Saudi Arabia. Imagine if we like just applied the same standards that the U.S. preaches when we want to invade someone to Saudi Arabia, because they are maybe they're the nastiest state in probably the planet. Like they are a nasty monarchy that basically enslaves their female population. You know,
they do all the things that we
hangs them for witchcraft.
Yeah.
You know, they hunt down warlocks. There's total religious oppression to Shiites. They treat their migrant workers like fucking slaves. You ever see the picture of the guy right when COVID-19 broke out, that there was a guy wearing a sanitizer suit?
Yep. Wearing the hand sanitizer thing, and he just had to be a hand sanitizer.
It's just imagine just using, like, you know, our standards of morality against a place that has a king. It's a joke. It's the Beverly Hillbillies in the Middle East. they just got lucky enough where the borders that were drawn happened to have the second favorable, right? Easiest ones to take out of the ground, and they played ball. And those guys are fake Muslims anyway. You know, they just use Islam as a way to keep power. You know, they use Islam as a way because in order to have a monarchy, you need to have a divine right from God. You know, like that's how the European monarchs justified their rule, is that they had a divine right from God coming right from the playbook of Louis XIV. That was the same. This is the same type of belief system or power structure that, you know, these monarchs in the Gulf have. You know, they have the divine right from God.
I mean, I wouldn't exactly call it fake, because they do, you know, kind of cherry pick a whole lot of the, you know, teachings of the Quran and utilize that to subjugate their people.
The monarchs aren't.
I think they believe in that shit.
The monarchs don't give a fuck. They use that stuff just to control the population. A lot of the people connected to the Saudi royal family are absolute heathens who don't actually practice any of the good things about Islam. They're not a good example. I have nothing but negative things to say about the Saudi royal family, as you know.
Well, kind of coming back to this, you know, so you were saying that the House Armed Services Committee voted pretty much unanimously to, you know, for this amendment that requires certain conditions to be placed for us to be able to pull back troops away from Afghanistan. And I think you're trying to make the case to me here that at the same time that we're trying to draw down troops from Afghanistan and we're levying as much, you know, diplomatic and legislative hurdles against doing that, at the same time that this is happening, are you making the case that we're now blowing up a story about an alleged Russian bounty to further make it difficult to pull out of Afghanistan? Is that the link that you're trying to make here?
I mean, that's the simplest conclusion. Like, that's how I come to that's the Occam's razor conclusion, you know, like that they're trying to stir stuff up right as Trump is starting to pull troops, as Trump is trying to reduce the troop count to its lowest level. 4,500 troops they want to bring this down to? That would be the lowest level since the very beginning of the war. It certainly seems like a very weird coincidence. Why now? Why now? Because
why
Trump,
at all? Why at all?
Why at all? But one of the, you know, Trump hasn't really done anything that he ran on. You know, not really a damn thing. You know, the one thing that he did that made his base happy, or some of his base happy, was his tax cuts that he had.
Right.
Then protecting some, and then some, you know, nepotism, manufacturing nepotism, and saving jobs and giving contracts and saving some, you know, saving select industry jobs was another thing that just served certain voting blocks. But a lot of his policies didn't really give that boost to the Rust Belt that you know that he was voted for. He didn't follow through with his immigration policy. He didn't follow through with the wall. Obviously, he actually ended up being more, when you look at his policies, more pro-immigration than the past Democratic president. You know, a lot of the things that he was criticized for in that immigration were continuations of Obama's policy. And one of the things that he was supposed to do in his campaign was to get the U.S. out of these retarded wars in the Middle East, in the greater Middle East area. And he was not able to do anything except remove troop counts from Syria, which he wants to do. And like Obama, Trump has, I think Barack Obama and Trump are pretty similar in terms of like what their intentions were when they came to office. Like they both ran on getting us out of these wars. They came in and then they got surrounded by these freaks who didn't let them do it. And it's getting troops out of Afghanistan would be a huge deal. It would be ending the longest war in American history. And it's just we can't have that. You know, there's too many claws in that war to let our military presence go in that country that has destroyed 2 empires in the past, which is on its way of destroying another empire, meaning the British Empire and the Russian Empire, and the Persian Empire too. No one has ever lasted in that country. That country is I'm going to just steal lines, say what Scott Horton says. It's the size of Texas. It's shaped like Colorado. It has mountains. It has deserts. The terrain is inhospitable. It's a very inhospitable place, and it's very easy to be completely isolated and develop a warlord culture. And the people have rifles. They like using them, and you're never going to be able to occupy that place and bring, liberal democracy, John Locke liberal democracy to that country. Unfortunately, it's just not in the cards for that country. It sucks that for people who live in urban centers and don't want to live under Sharia law, but there is absolutely no way that you would be able to go and occupy that country unless you wanted to do it for the next 20 years and occupy that country with 500,000 soldiers. You're not doing it, man.
Yeah.
Like, you can't shift. You can't just completely uplift the culture. Like, you can't change a 13th century society into a 21st century society through the threat of violence. It's just not going to work. It's never worked ever. People are like, oh, well, Japan did it. Well, no, Japan already had the infrastructure set up. It's like, I just think it's just nuts about having this presence at that country. Like, why? There's been nothing but pain. And there's been nothing but pain for the Afghans there too.
Right.
It's not like we're there. It's not like it's not a violent place and we're preventing violence. There's massive amounts of violence that go on in Kabul every single day. There's fucking terrorists. When we say Taliban is not a terrorist organization, they definitely are a terrorist organization. In Afghanistan, they're a terrorist organization. Right. Like, they use terrorist tactics there. But they're not a
They're a domestic terrorist organization for their domestic territory.
So, yeah.
And what's so ironic about all of this, and kind of going back to the alleged Russian bounties, right? The thing that they're alleging here is that, again, Russia was pissed off about something that we did, and therefore they decided to pay the Afghanis, the Taliban, money to kill us in Afghanistan and do like a little proxy war, if you will. But what's so ironic about this, just utterly ironic, is the fact that we've done this too. We did this shit to the Russians. We did literally that. Like, we paid Afghani people, specifically the Mujahideen, to kill Russians. Like, we gave them guns and we gave them money, and we're like, yo, go kill those people.
Well, what's funny about that is that's kind of like the justification from the Democratic political wing. Mm-hmm. That's what Nancy Pelosi has been saying. She made this quote. It's like, oh, it's all about, the Russians never got over, the 1980s when so Charlie Wilson went in there and saved everyone. And Charlie Wilson gave everyone Stinger missiles and now all that. You ever see that movie, Charlie Wilson's War?
No, I didn't see the movie, but I'm familiar with the plot.
See it. It's just not very good.
It's just like, but why? Why now? Like, of all the decades that have elapsed since then, 30 years or whatever.
Oh, there's this old Russian intelligence guy who just never got over his comrade Vlad.
40 years later, like, come on.
Missile. His comrade, he got into his MiG got into an accident, and his buddy Vlad, ended up dying, and he never got over it. So he wanted to take out his anger on a random U.S. serviceman.
So he waited
40 fucking years later. He decided to get his revenge on random 22-year-olds from Alabama.
Right.
Okay, that sounds real fucking plausible.
Right.
Like, the only incentive I can think that Russia would want to do, what would be doing this for, The only would be if they were trying to do the same thing we did to them, which you just brought up,
right?
To drag them into drag us into another Vietnam, or prevent us. We're already in another Vietnam. To prevent us from leaving another Vietnam, prevent us from leaving the country, because then they know if they spark something up, then the U.S. war apparatus will just never let that go, and just
leave, right?
Will just bring every justification to the table to continue the occupation of Afghanistan. Right. And they know that this war is absolutely draining on the U.S. economy.
I mean, if we want to talk,
that would be the big thing.
Yeah.
So that would just leave you with the justification to leave anyway. Like, if let's just say that there is a sophisticated bounty program where Russia is
totally true, right?
Where it's coming from the top. Putin is giving bounties, is telling them to take out, Jimmy from South Carolina whenever he sees him. It's like, wouldn't that be all the more reason to not be in that place? Like, wouldn't that just be further justifications? Like, wow, this is a dangerous place. We shouldn't be sending people to die there. I think
for no clear and purpose reason. Now, I personally think that Russia is giving the Taliban money and is arming them, but not for this reason that they're like pissed off from a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old like situation. And I don't think it's because they'd like to drag the United States security apparatus through yet another Vietnam. I honestly think it's just proximity, like you forget, like, Afghanistan's right there on the border, and I bet that they are giving them money and guns and stuff like that so they can keep up friendly relations with their crazy ass neighbors, I bet that's what they're doing. They're probably definitely giving them guns and money, but not explicitly to say go kill coalition forces.
Well, the Russians don't favor the Pashtun population there. They favor the Uzbeks there. The Uzbeks are the ones who have closer relations to the Russians.
But I mean, it's just like our policy was just to give everybody money. Why wouldn't they do the same thing?
I mean,
they literally give everyone money.
They could be doing it, and like everyone, and people are like, well, they have AK-47s. Like, how many
everybody
countries,
in the fucking
how many
Middle
fucking
East
countries manufacture a Kalashnikov like rifles, dude?
Exactly.
Like, at least fucking
we did a whole episode
15
on this shit.
countries manufacture those rifles.
The United States has a company that makes Kalashnikovs right now. Like, come on, you can buy an American-made AK-47 if you wanted.
Wouldn't be surprised me in the world of covert operations that at one point there were money transfers between a Russian intelligence to the Taliban. Mm-hmm. I will definitely submit to that.
That's definitely happening.
That's definitely a possibility and probability at one point over the past 20 years of being in that war
100%.
Or being in this war. But the justification that the U.S. is there. I mean, the Russians did this to get revenge on.
This is silly.
On the Soviet-Afghan war is beyond lunacy. So, for those of you who don't know, in 1973, let's peel this back because we wanted to talk about this a little bit. So, the Mujahideen. You ever see Rocky III?
No, I didn't see the third one. Actually.
So Rocky III takes place in Afghanistan, and Rocky is fighting the Soviets. He's fighting the Soviets with the brave fighters in the Mujahideen. This movie was made in the 80s.
I gotta watch this then.
This movie was made in the 80s, so it reflects 80s values. And at the very end of the movie, the film credit rolls. It says, "This film is dedicated to the brave fighters of the Mujahideen." I swear, I shit you not. And it's a meme. It's like a meme now where people just throw that over, like, the ending of the Joker, the new Joker,
right? The newest one
with the crazy guy,
Joaquin Phoenix.
They did that to the Joker film. They do. It's a funny meme, but now we don't do it because the Mujahideen eventually encompass what would become Al Qaeda and. Oopsie. So
talk about cancel culture. I think they might have to cancel Rocky 3 now.
Yeah, they just edited that scene out. So back in the day, during the days of the Soviet Union and United States existing on the same planet, there used to be a very large power struggle that these two empires would basically use these third world countries as chess pieces and always try to get one over on each other. And the Afghanistan is close to Russia, and their government, there was a coup in Afghanistan in 1973, and they installed a secular government that was leaning towards the Soviet Union. Surprise, surprise. Like many countries started leaning towards the Soviet Union in that sphere of the world.
Right.
So the U.S. tried organizing coups a couple times through Pakistan and through Iran. And when I say Iran, I mean before the Islamic Revolution, Iran, when the Shah was in charge, when Iran was our best friends. When we were friends.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't work. That's what the U.S. used to do. They used to just throw coups, assassinate leaders, elected officials, overthrow democracies on a regular basis,
for the lulz.
And for the lulz. And the Carter administration started aiding the opposition to the pro-Soviet government in Kabul in order to induce the Soviets to invade and ultimately get stuck in a quagmire like the U.S. did in Vietnam.
Right. We were poking the bear, basically.
So it was the intention. It wasn't that the Soviets invaded and the U.S. started aiding the opposition to the pro-communist government. They intentionally they started fostering the anti-communist government with the intention of having the Soviet Union invade, which honestly was a pretty good idea.
It worked.
It worked in the context of really getting the Soviets into a bad situation.
Right.
That definitely worked. The consequences that happened decades later were definitely really terrible for the United States.
Yeah.
So the karma came back. But at the time, it fucked the Soviet Union. And we know this because Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, who also was in the Lyndon B. Johnson administration, Zbigniew Brzezinski, admitted this. He said he said this, like he told Carter that this is what we need to do. By the way, Brzezinski is Zbigniew Brzezinski is the father of Mika Brzezinski on The Morning Joe.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Which shows you that there is a deep tie between the national security apparatus mm-hmm. and the corporate press. Mm-hmm. And The Morning Joe show is basically just like a big sack of evil. Like you have Joe Scarborough, who allegedly killed the guy. And
allegedly
killed the guy. I know it's a big allegedly. And then Mika and Joe both they're lovers and they're mm-hmm. co-hosts, and they both were having an affair with each other, so they both destroyed each other's marriages. Like, just like, what is this?
Yeah, it's super
what
toxic.
am I watching?
Yeah.
who are these people? And Joe Scarborough was a former congressman, and it's just fucking.
It's a weird show.
I'm just
it's
like
a weird show.
Ew. Like, so and Robert Gates himself, who was Obama's Secretary of Defense, he said that the U.S. started invading them 6 months before. In his own memoirs, he said that the U.S. started aiding the Mujahideen about 6 months prior to the Soviet intervention. And
they're coming for you, man. You know too much.
Someone's also like cursing, so I don't know what's going on. And let's talk about the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. It makes the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan look like fucking child's play. Like, there is not even a close comparison. Soviet Union lost about 10,000 people. They slaughtered at least 10 million people. They had huge standing armies. They completely annihilated and massacred villages. Complete war crimes, the Soviet Unions. They were fucking awful. And the Soviet Union was an awful, awful place. It was an awful bully state as well. So I'm not one of these like anti-American people who just criticizes U.S. foreign policy, but they killed over 1 million people, or I mean, no one really knows the numbers, but they slaughtered a lot of innocent people. The U.S. though created the largest covert operation in the history of the CIA. So in the 1980s, the foreign policy doctrine became that the natural ally to the U.S. Would be the religious fanatics in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. They would be the core ally in the struggle against communism, because Muslim fundamentalists before 9/11, they were seen as the better option for two reasons: because they were fierce anti-communists because the communists were it was an atheistic society, right. and they also opposed secular nationalists such as Nasser and Mossadegh of Egypt and Iran. So the CIA, and in coalition with the ISI of Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, all three of those intelligence apparatuses, they turned the Afghan jihad into a global war waged by all Muslim states against the Soviet Union. 35,000 Muslim radicals from 40 Islamic countries joined Afghanistan to fight between 1982 and 1992. Tens of thousands more came to study in these Pakistani madrasas, and eventually more than 100,000 foreign Muslim radicals were directly influenced by the Afghan jihad. The U.S. would even spend millions of dollars to supply school children with textbooks with militant Islamic teachings. And this was reported by the Washington Post. It was like a propaganda campaign. There's a fucking fly flying in my face. Sorry, I'm waving my hand. It was a propaganda campaign to turn young children radically against the Soviet Union. I mean, using their own images that would.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of money pumping through that.
John Wayne film,
There's a lot of money pumping through that. I think that the official funding from these organizations was like almost $700K in '79. And then they increased that dramatically over the next couple of years. And it was somewhere between 20 and 30 million per year in 1980. And it got as high as $630 million per year by 1987. So huge amounts of money poured into this. Just absolutely ridiculous. And then after the withdrawal, of the Soviet forces in '89, they basically the Mujahideen just kept fighting against the existing president's army, and then that's how they started this Afghan civil war. So going back to what you said earlier about like how much pain and suffering there was there, we started poking the bear there pretty early. Then the Russians came in and invaded, killed 1 million people. Then we dumped millions and millions of dollars and invited tens of thousands of people from all over the world, all over the Muslim world at least, to come fight against them in their territory. Then by the time the Soviets were kicked out, there was a civil war. Just like cherry on top. Now there's a civil war. And this happened in the span of what? 15 years? 20 years maybe?
And don't forget,
nonstop.
This is where Osama bin Laden comes from.
Right.
This is where the Afghan Arabs
came up.
The Afghan Arabs that came from the Arabian Peninsula that fought with the rebels, like that was their come up that eventually turned into Al Qaeda. So there's a lot of money that was spent to. It was kind of like a lot of This is why I can't stand people who are like so anti-Islam. Like I get really bothered by the kind of the mainstream right wing in the U.S. that's just like Islam is taking over. They're violent. I just want to be clear that even among the Salafist, like hardline Wahhabi Muslims, 99% of them are nonviolent, by the way. I just want to throw that out there. The vast majority of the most extreme are nonviolent. Yeah, they have conservative views, but a lot of these this creation of like radical, like militant Islamist groups. This is our own Frankenstein. This is our Frankenstein. It's, if you want to know who, and I'm stealing this from Dave Smith, the comedian, but I heard him say this. If you want to know who America's enemy is going to be tomorrow, see who they're funding today. I might be paraphrasing it, but check out who we're funding today to see who America's enemy is tomorrow. Right. And it couldn't be more true. The U.S. fostered the religious fanatics in order, or they fostered religious fanaticism in order to be a bulwark against communism. And it worked. It was a successful campaign at the time, but it definitely was something that resulted in massive amounts of blowback in the future.
I mean, kind of to bring this all back to the initial conversation about, whether or not Russia was placing bounties, on American soldiers here. I think, I think I'd like to maybe just quote Danny Sherson, because his article on this was very well written and kind of hilarious. I think I'll start from here and I'll say, furthermore, it's hardly mere whataboutism to note the wider irony and rank hypocrisy of Washington howling about ostensible Russian bounties on American trooper heads. After all, this comes from a U.S. government that literally just placed public bounties on Venezuela's president, elected legislators, and a former intelligence chief and retired general, then acted shocked, just shocked, when some of its own American ex-special forces mercenaries tried to collect on the multi-million-dollar reward. Point is, there's plenty cause for sensible skepticism. Surely, just a short list of now infamous touchstone terms, WMD, Libya, collusion, Pentagon or Afghanistan papers, EITs, etc., should be just enough justification for caution. The same intelligence says, that's quoted in the New York Times headline, has done a whole lot of saysing on every one of our super spook fiascos. I think he makes a really good point there.
No, he does. Danny makes a great point, as he always does, and he does really awesome work. I have one more thing to add, and I know I'm jumping into more of a conspiratorial territory right now. This is like my.
Are we going into Epstein? Because
no,
that was some.
I don't want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. The whole thing just makes me sick to my stomach. But I do think that Ghislaine Maxwell
is going to Epstein herself.
I feel very horrible for her suicide, upcoming suicide. Which, I mean, I really want her to name people, and I don't want her to name just Prince Andrew, because that would just be totally unclimactic.
Name them
like,
all,
Prince Andrew. Yeah, we already fucking know that. Everyone has an idea that Les Wexner and
we saw the Netflix documentary.
We already know that Les Wexner and Alan Dershowitz and Ehud Barak were all involved. It's kind of funny because politically, that people on the right are like, "Oh, I can't wait till Bill Clinton's brought down," and then people on the left are like, "I can't wait till Trump gets brought down." Like, they're just projecting their political enemies into this scandal, which is kind of funny.
And the funny part is probably that all of them are going to be true.
I mean, Bill Clinton has been on the plane like 29 times or something like that. So like, come on, that's kind of incredibly weird. But I think the main thing about the Epstein stuff is that, like, it seems highly likely that this was involving intelligence agencies across the world, which is when the media will stop covering it. Mm-hmm. But here's my actual
conspiracy.
I think that Adam Schiff was the source of the information to the New York Times and Washington Post.
He was the unnamed intelligence official?
He was briefed back in February,
right,
of the exact same intelligence that was put on the report for Trump,
right,
and he took no action of the response prior. But then I think he leaked the information as it got closer to the withdrawal period, and so this is totally speculation. I can't prove this, but I kind of get a sense that Adam Schiff is the person who leaked the information.
Why?
Because
why do you think? Just out of curiosity.
Mainly the fact that he had access to it with him being on the Armed Service Committee, and then him having been briefed, and then just his history of being like the lead Russia Gate conspirer, the lead Russia Gate allegation guy, and also he's just a super warmonger. Out of the Democrats, he's the most war-like Democrat maybe on the planet. So I just feel I suspect him. I can't prove it. I have a suspicion that Adam
intelligence agencies have told me that Adam Schiff actually leaked all this information because he wanted to start another war in Afghanistan.
And there's something about Adam Schiff, like Trump does. Say what you want about Trump, that he does think of good nicknames, like Sloppy Steve, Shifty Schiff. Did he call him Skinny Neck Shift, Pencil Neck Shift, or is that somebody else? Maybe I'm just contributing Trump credit where he doesn't deserve any. But his long skinny neck and his face that looks like the thing from Sesame Street, that the thing from was it the Muppet Babies, that's like burr, 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 burr. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
whatever the name
is,
that name was. He just looks like he doesn't look human. He looks like a cartoon caricature. He has like this skinny neck, like this unproportional skinny neck, and his face. He's such a punchable face. So I have a very, very strong bias.
You're on to him. You're on to him.
But I don't know. I wouldn't. I kind of that's my suspicion.
Oh, watch now. Breitbart News is going to pick up on this story and say an unnamed intelligence
geopolitical commentator.
Yeah.
Unnamed they corroborate the story
with themselves.
Hey, I wouldn't be surprised if someone picks up that story.
Yeah.
I got the idea originally from. I mean, I've heard. I mean, I would be lying if I told you I came up with that on my own. The guys over at Moon of Alabama had something on it, and it made a lot of sense to me. So, but I mean, that's kind of how I'm feeling right now. It's that a little kind of annoyed at a lot of the stuff that's going on, and I'm
annoyed too for like
if you're part of the 60%, like I don't know, just think about it.
Right.
And maybe it is true, but
just pay attention to the sources. It's just like I bet there's something there, but it's probably not as like we just pointed out. Like the intelligence agencies themselves have said, like, this information is kind of maybe meh at best, and then the mainstream media just took it and run with it. They're like, yeah, Orange Man bad, fucking Russia bad, So like, just read it a bit more, like actually read what they write, and like underline all the times that they say intelligence agencies said, without naming which one it was or who it was or any specificity. Just like do it that way, and then like tell me again if you totally believe that this was real. I'm not saying that it's totally fake, but just
the problem is that people don't read the articles. No, like I'm serious. People just don't.
They read the headlines and that's it.
They read the headline and then they read the first paragraph. They'll spend about 2 minutes of reading time on an article that's about 8 minutes long, and just people don't have the attention span to really read this stuff. So I mean, you see what headlines are propped up, and a lot of this is just the media's justification is just clickbait. You know what I mean? Like, this is a story that's gonna get a lot of clicks.
I mean, could you imagine this headline? It says, Russians probably gave some money to the Taliban, and maybe it resulted in some dead Americans, but we haven't figured that out, and we have an uncorroborated source. Read more. How many people are going to click on that headline?
Intelligence agencies debate sources that may or may not corroborate a bounty program in Afghanistan. Like, nobody's gonna
click on that shit.
No one's gonna click on that at all. But if you say Russia hired mercenaries to kill U.S. troops, if you die in the line of service, doesn't your family get like an explanation of what happened?
Well, that's what Tammy Duckworth's on right now. Like, Tammy Duckworth is like basically making the case that like all these Gold Star families, which is what they would be, right? People, American families whose, a family member died in service, deserve some respect and deserve, rightfully so, an explanation as to why their son or daughter died, in a foreign country. And she's saying that we just she's trying to get more evidence out of it. And I kind of I respect that, even though I'm skeptical about the whole situation in the first place. Like, I totally agree with Tammy. I think that we should absolutely get all the information. Like, show me what you got. Those Gold Star families deserve to know. And I kind of want to know too.
Yeah, you absolutely deserve to know if your family member dies, if your son dies or husband dies in Afghanistan. And what annoys me is that if it's like kind of false anger that these briefings are creating because of someone who lost somebody, will want to look for answers. And I'm speechless at this point. I don't even feel like rambling on anymore. You have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just read more than just the headlines. A lot of these, like, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle of totally true and bullshit. And honestly, the only way to figure that out for yourself is to really think about it and read a lot of different sources and try to piece together the puzzle as best you can and try to understand where the motivations are. Both of the people that are reporting it and the people who are, giving the evidence.
Yes. Read the entire article. It's a good start. All right, we're getting up. It's super hot in here. It's summer. AC is off, and I'm ready to call this an episode. Everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Bro History. Make sure that you rate the podcast 5 stars. We just hit 300 ratings, which was pretty cool. Woo. So if you guys can rate the podcast on iTunes if you're listening, it really does help the podcast grow. And if you're on, if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe. We weren't able to live stream this one because something happened, but we're going to put the recording up. So subscribe to the channel. And everything else, just be safe out there. Don't, be healthy. And Danny, I'm always terrible at ending these podcasts, so just
peace. That's it.
All right, peace.
See ya.